First things first, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we produce this show. I am on Darug and Gundungurra land, and Holly and Sophie are on Ngunnawal land. We speak about this every episode because this is not just a part of our history, it is a part of our now. The stolen generation, it's not just a catchy term that we get taught in school about the backward practices of days gone by. There are currently more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children living in out-of-home care than there ever were in the period that we refer to as the stolen generation. And it's more than 10 times that of non-Indigenous kids. Our government said sorry, but, I was taught that if you mean it when you say sorry for something, you don't do it again. Now we'll move on to the show. Welcome to Somebody You Love, or The Sale of Two Titties. I'm Jenna Love.
And I'm Holly Hart.
And we're experts in disappointing our parents, breaching community guidelines, and banging the people who vote against our rights.
Sophie is renowned for being the only German trans mistress in Australia. She also offers GFE services, is a trained counsellor, has a handful of degrees and devotes herself to sex worker advocacy. She has recently announced her intentions to retire from sex work this year due to the negative experiences she has encountered as a trans person within the industry. We've had gender diverse people on the show before, but thus far we haven't delved into the challenges unique to this community. So we invited Sophie on the show to share her perspective.
Welcome, Sophie.
Hi, Sophie.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I've been listening to the occasional episodes here and there, and I really love your work. I think it's really important.
Oh, thank you so
beautiful.
much. Thank you for making the time to come and chat with us.
Yes.
I was stoked that you asked me.
Oh, yay. Oh, that's so nice to hear.
Yeah. Cool. No, we were very stoked that you agreed. We were excited. We thought we've had a range of people on the show, but we haven't delved into the challenges. And you raised on social media a few months ago some of the challenges that you've been facing. And it was a really emotional and really heartfelt post. And it just sort of struck a chord with us where we thought this is something we really need to understand. And it's a lot to ask somebody to give us their emotional labour in educating us and our listeners, but we hoped that would be an opportunity for us to learn, and we appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, no, I mean, I also appreciate it. Since I sort of made that post, I was like, I had a few colleagues reach out, which I think is really nice. I think it's really important that cis workers not ignore this issue, I guess, or shed light on it, or I've had people offering collabs, or just sharing their sympathies, or just engaging with the issue at hand, which I think is really important in whichever way, and a various different ways, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's tricky because we so often don't see all of these issues that people in the industry face because, from a marketing perspective, it's really hard to put it out there, right? It's really hard to post on your Twitter that's hey, I'm sexy, come have sex with me, going, actually, I face a lot of discrimination all the time and things are not rosy. It's not very sexy, is it?
Yeah, that's actually a core issue that you touch on because especially for trans sex workers, we're sort of often expected to be sexual in a certain way. It's then very hard to be actually, this is not how I like having sex. That's a particularly pronounced problem for trans femme people who are expected to have sex a certain way because it's client fantasy that they specifically top them. Mm-hmm. Whereas there's a lot of trans femme folks, I mean myself included, for whom it's not necessarily the most enjoyable thing to do.
Of course. So let's go back to the beginning. Can you share with us your sex working backstory? So particularly maybe how you got started and your experience as a trans person and your beginnings in the industry.
Yeah, so my beginnings in the industry is I guess somewhat unconventional because I used to actually research sex work as a trans person. So as a trans person, I was always interested in I guess part of my research was like engaging with parts of the trans community that people don't often engage in. And there's like a lot of like, I guess, sex work phobia in like queer circles, in queer communities, where like, you know, it's like this part of the trans community that we like often don't talk about, or, you know, within the broader queer community, but also within the trans community. So like, but like as a trans person, I thought it was always very strange that we like never spoke about trans sex workers, because trans sex work is like such a huge part of being trans. There's a lot of, I mean, if you're a trans feminine person, you know, there's a very, very, very high likelihood that you have in some form or another engaged in sex work because of the economic marginalization and social marginalization that trans people face. So there's like this whole part of this community that I was a part of that wasn't really like spoken about. So I wanted, like, as a researcher, like, I'm actually like an anthropologist. So what we do is like we engage with like subcultures and communities, and I was like what we would call a partial insider. So like as a trans person, I was researching and doing work with trans people, but as a non-sex worker, I was like engaging with sex workers as like a non-sex worker. So it was like a very interesting position that I had, because obviously, like, you know, sex work advocacy is a lot of that is about having sex workers speak on their own behalf and like nothing about us without us. So I was always like in this kind of like strange situation where I was kind of like, you know, I was part of the trans community aspect, but I wasn't part of the sex community aspect. And then so as I like got to know more people in the trans sex work community, I guess like became also very close friends with a lot of the people that like I was working with, because anthropology is like very like involved. It's like all about getting to know people's lives by like actually participating in their daily lives and being like affirmed, because like the idea is that like you can't really understand someone unless you like really take part in their like daily life. And then like I guess like fast forward, to cut the story short, after being like a PhD student for like, you know, 4 years or so, it's like a very exploitative industry. It's like always interesting how, like, you know, when we talk about sex work, outsiders talk about sex work being this exploitative industry, but like actually my own experience is that academia is significantly like way, way, way more exploitative as an industry. And I was basically just like really, really poor. And after 4 years, they just expect you to work full time without any pay. So your scholarship runs out. The scholarship itself was only $26,000 a year. And I was like expected to, like, Australian dollars, and I was expected to live in the US on that income, which is like impossible when you live in LA, where like rents alone is like 4 digits usually, and that's like in the share housing. But I was like basically broke, and then my scholarship ran out. So after 3.5 years, they're like, well, you got no more, we're not paying you anymore. But it's like basically impossible to finish a PhD in 3.5 years, especially in anthropology. Yeah. So I was really, really broke, but I knew of all this theory of how to make money successfully as a sex worker, as a trans sex worker. And like I was really knowledgeable on the topic, and I like got to learn how it's like, how to do it in like, I guess I got to learn from the best in many ways. So I was like, well, I guess like I have this like really good way of like getting out of this situation, and I can do it really well because I know all the theory behind it. And it would also like enrich my own research and my own advocacy as well, because over time I'd like also become really like involved in like sex work advocacy, because in all the trans spaces that I was in, I'd always be talking about sex worker rights. So it was like kind of like one thing led to another, and it was kind of like a foregone logical conclusion for me to also do sex work.
That's amazing. Yeah. Like you had done like full proper academic research before getting into it. The rest of us just sort of found a dick in our mouth and went, well, I guess we're doing it.
Yeah, you were the most qualified entry sex worker that exists ever.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just like a massive nerd. Everything that I ever like do, I always like spend way too long researching it before doing it. I think like there's also this like really interesting aspect that I think a lot of people don't talk about, especially when you're like a queer person. Pornography specifically, and like also for trans people, is like often the first encounter that you have with that sort of minority status. Like the first time I like saw, there was like trans like women in popular representations in popular culture, but they were all like kind of portrayals of like ridiculousness and like failed like womanhood. And there's like countless examples like of in the 90s and early 2000s of like really harmful portrayals of trans women. But then there was trans pornography where you'd actually have trans feminine folks be like really attractive and really sexy. And it was kind of like for the first time that I'd come across like a trans person, a trans woman who's like, you know, desirable and like pretty. And it's like really encouraging to like see that it's like actually possible to, you know, be attractive and not just like a comedic failure at womanhood, you know? So there's like a lot of like personal, like, I think stakes in like everything that I do, and like in my research on trans sex work and like becoming a trans sex worker. So there's like, yeah, it's very like, it's like a very intimate kind of like journey for me as well.
You offer DOM services as well as GFE. Would you say that it's an even split, or that one is more popular than the other?
Yeah, so I originally started doing DOM stuff not because I was like a lifestyle kinkster or anything. I mean, I think a lot of folks who get into professional BDSM stuff have like, you know, have done it lifestyle for a while. For me, it was like a purely like pragmatic and economic decision. I've had like physical issues with like bottoming, which is like an aspect about trans sex work that I would also like to talk about, because like obviously as like a trans feminine sex worker, you're just like expected to have anal sex, but like there's a lot of reasons why physically you can't have anal sex at all or can't have regular anal sex. So it was like at the beginning like just like a very, very like pragmatic and economic decision to just like, you know, be a top and like in that space, like rather than just like branding myself like as just like a top, you'd like sort of like carve that identity out a little bit more. And it's kind of like a very like logical thing it was a very logical thing for me to creatively like turn that into like a sort of like, you know, very dominant kind of mistress personality. So that's kind of like how I started. And then also there's like this whole like aspect of like there's like an element of like I think safety that comes with topping. Like it's like I don't have to worry about people stealthing me when I'm topping, because I like have, you know, full view and control of like the intercourse itself. So there's like a lot of like I think, and you're like always on top and in control of the situation, and the clients that you see, they just like want to be submissive and they just sort of want to be little bitches basically. And I mean that's great. Like there's nothing wrong with being a little bitch, because that's also why I offer GFE services, because like I actually really enjoy that aspect. But like I think so initially when I was first getting into it, because it is like quite daunting getting into sex work, I was like, well, this is like I guess a very like safe way for me to get into it. But like over time, like I was like kind of getting really sick of it. So in terms of like the split for me, like it's really like 95% people asking for DOM services or for top services, like the differing degrees. Some people don't really care so much about the domination and latex aspect of it, but they just want you to top. And this is like a really key issue, I think, in trans sex work, is that like almost every single client that comes and sees you wants you to top. It's like it often seems like it's the only reason why they even come and see you and are interested in trans women, because if they just want to get laid, they could just like go and see a cis woman. So it's like it often feels like it's like the only sort of like you know, the only sort of contributing factor, or the only purpose that you have in this industry is just to be a top. And that's like, that can be like a really profoundly alienating space as a trans feminine person.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but presumably that's not going to help if you're feeling quite dysphoric about the body parts that you have?
Yeah, I mean, so like dysphoria, like I guess like we should like sort of like I guess explain the term, but it's like I guess if you feeling a like discomfort within your own body, like in regards to your gender, a lot of like trans feminine folks, they don't necessarily feel dysphoric about topping or their genitalia, but it can become, for me personally, it like became very dysphoric because it was like kind of like all that people saw in me. And it's like it's very frustrating because it becomes this sort of like overdetermined like this overdetermined label that sort of like takes over everything that you are. Like people don't see me because like I'm a woman, people don't see me because I'm pretty, people like literally only care about the hard cock. And it's like, seriously, just go and see a male escort at that point, because it's like it's just like a really, really like reductive and like objectifying way of like thinking about me as a person. For me, like topping is like also like, it's like a very like, I mean, these are like very like I guess intimate questions about one's sexuality, but like, you know, I don't necessarily mind topping, but when it comes to just being about that and nothing else, it's like really reductive. So there's like a lot of issues in that space, especially when you're like, you get clients, for example, and they'll like be like, I want you to pound me for an hour straight with like, and then like shoot a big load across my face. And like, I know where this like idea comes from. It's just like, you know, men don't really get to explore that space of like being submissive, being like a little bitch, being like fucked like a you know, like a pillow princess. And like that's like a very like awesome experience, and I personally like love that in my like private life. but like it's like, why are you asking trans feminine people and trans women to do this erotic labor? Just ask men to do that labor for you, just because you have like this like really like internalized homophobia. But what you're actually asking is a sexual service that cis men are way better positioned to do, because there's like physical realities to trans feminine bodies, which is another aspect that I really need to talk about. And that is that, you know, we can't have prolonged, or like I guess like it depends, but for trans feminine folks who are on HRT, which is like hormone replacement therapy, which means you take testosterone blockers and you take estrogen. So basically my estrogen levels and my testosterone levels are the same as that of a cis woman in my age. So I basically have very, very, very low to zero testosterone. That means that like I can't actually have a boner for very long. And it's like very hard to maintain it, and it's not that hard. Mm-hmm. And then same goes with like cum shots. Like you just like don't actually produce like a cum shot. Yeah. So and then so you're like placed into this like market position where you're commercially incentivized to do this one thing, but your body and like the way you kind of like want to like model your body and shape your body as a trans person, as a trans feminine person, is another way. And it comes, and then you end up in these situations where like a lot of trans feminine sex workers, so you have these situations where you have trans feminine workers who, for example, skip their hormone regimens, they skip their blockers, so they like increase their testosterone levels so they can maintain longer erections and they can shoot big loads. But that comes like at a huge personal cost, because your body changes in ways that you don't want, as like, or that most trans feminine people don't want. Like because, you know, I want my body to be like, you know, soft, and I want like breast tissue, and I don't want like hair stubbles all over my body, and like I want that fat redistribution that like is around my hips. And like by stopping like HRT to perform sexual labor in a certain way, I am actually like doing things to my body that I don't want to do to my body. So we're like really in this like double bind in a way, where like we have to choose often between like, you know, performing sexual labor to the satisfaction of our clients, or fashioning our bodies in the way that we see fit for ourselves. And that causes dysphoria. if I just pick up on the second half of that question of Holly's, in terms of the GGFE service. So like over time, I've been increasingly wanting to like also in my work have sex have the kind of sex that I also like would enjoy in my private life, which is like way more like, being a bottom. And even though it's like, personally, I find it a lot more work in the sense that, like, it's like I have to have anal sex and, like, I have to, like, prepare and, like, I have to be careful I don't get injured, and I have to, like, make sure that it's, like, with the right person. It just, like, I've just, like, been trying to, like, sort of incorporate that into my brand because, like, it's unfair for, and this applies not just to trans workers, but this applies to queer workers more generally. If you're, like, a lesbian sex worker or if you're, like, a queer sex worker who doesn't necessarily enjoy having sex with cis men, we just, like, have to like, put in more labor into our sex work because we can't really have sex in the way we would enjoy in our personal lives. So like I often like wish that I was just like a straight cis woman because then I could just like have sex, even if it's sometimes bad sex, I could just like have sex in a way that aligns with my sexuality. But that's like really difficult for queer and trans sex workers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that like even though absolutely, yes, sometimes it's bad sex, plenty of times I'm not attracted to the person, all of that. I also regularly have experiences where I'm having excellent sex, which is exactly the kind of sex that I want to have. And because of everything you've outlined, that's very difficult to attain for you. Yeah. So I do, of course, also have like bookings that I really enjoy and sex that I really enjoy, but it's rarer than for other workers. Yeah.
Sure. It's rarer than if I was a straight cis woman.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's like an additional, and that again is an additional layer of labor that that queer trans feminine folks have to do.
Are there any other sort of unrealistic expectations that you find are placed on trans workers?
I mean, I think those are pretty much like the main ones. Yeah, like, I mean, this idea that I can top for like, an hour at a time and stay hard all the time, that you can like shoot massive loads. And that I'm also just like always ready to have anal sex, that's like, that's on the bottom side of things. That's also like an unrealistic expectation that, I get like really envious or like angry when I see, cis workers, they charge like $500 extra for like anal. And I'm like, good on you. But also like, fuck, I wish I could do that. It's like just standard for us. Like it's like expected in like a regular hourly rate. And it's like ridiculous.
Sophie, in your retirement announcement, you mentioned that you have felt treated like a second-class citizen within the industry due to being trans. You've just had a chat with us about the unrealistic expectations that are placed on trans workers, but are there other things that are happening within the industry that us cis workers are not aware of or that we are ignorant to, in the most negative light, that make you feel like a second-class citizen? Yeah,
I mean, I think like the worst like experiences I've had of that kind of like second class citizen treatment has been like on Twitter, just like in indirect ways, like when you come across Twitter discourse and it's like just like so like absent of any considerations of like what it would be like for a trans worker. So just to give you like a very concrete example, I like recently came across a thread just like by some US like based cis workers who like seemed like who were like really big, like big accounts, they had big follower accounts, and they were like just talking about like anal and how like anal is like bad for you and it's like terrible and it's like gonna cause you all these chronic health issues and like like you shouldn't even be doing it and like clients shouldn't be requesting it. And then I was like just thinking like the questionable science behind that claim anyway aside, it's like just like, well, it's like great for you to have this like conversation, but like as like a trans woman we just like don't have a choice, so like it's like you just like these conversations that are like often taking place where it's like just like conversations that like just don't take at all like our existence into account. That kind of like feels like very erasing.
Totally. We're such a diverse community. The least we can do is try to pay attention to that and make sure we consider our peers.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess like other like instances that I've had was like, for example, if you just like have there's like cis workers who like just outright refuse to like do doubles with trans workers.
Wow.
It's like, I mean, it's like it's kind of like based. I just like can't help but feel it's like based on this idea that we're just like, you know, we're just like guys trying to get laid, and it's like so stupid. Like it's like. It's like, why would you not want to like work with a trans worker? Like, I just like don't see a valid reason other than, you just don't see us as like sex workers, as like women sex workers.
Yeah, and especially as you said, like such a large percentage of the trans femmes have engaged in sex work or will engage in sex work, and such a lot, you know, as Holly said, like it's such a diverse industry. There's a lot of trans people in the industry. Like, it's not like it's this little pocket. Like, we're all in it, man. And, trans femmes are a big part of the industry. So it's pretty absurd to be just leaving you out. I mean, yeah.
I think it's incredibly archaic to still be referring to sex workers as all women or all cis women. Like, I think that the assumption that we're all any one gender or any one identifier is wild, or that we were assigned any gender at birth or anything like that. The amount of sex workers that you just would never know any of their background or any of their personal demographics, I think assuming those things and just directing all of your attention to one tiny little segment of the community or only working with one little segment is really very strange.
Yeah.
I'm shook because just as a side note, I'm just going to show my ignorance here, but I just wasn't aware that it was such a large proportion. I know you haven't given us a number yet, but such a large proportion of trans femmes that do go into sex work. I guess I know that a lot that do, but I didn't know that it was such almost like a rite of passage. I didn't know there was so.
So these are numbers from the US. I got this. This is from a Hacking Hustling document. So this also includes online work, but like. In 2015, in a survey of trans people, 20% reported doing some type of sex work for food, money, or a place to sleep. So 20% is like, it's like
That's
1 in
huge.
5 trans people.
Wow.
Yeah, awesome. So if you have a look in the show notes, there are some links to some info if you are interested in looking more into this.
Trans people were and this is from a US statistic, 4 times more likely to have done sex work for income than non-trans people. So you have about 4 times as many. And there's an Australian statistic that I recently came across as well. But yeah, it's like, I mean, there's like a drastic overrepresentation of sex workers.
Wow.
And we need that solidarity, right? Because we have this common enemy. Like every time you come across a swerf online, I guarantee they're also a turf.
Yeah.
You know?
It's the classic
they're
combo,
hand in
isn't
hand.
it?
Yeah, the classic.
Get your swerf
They hate
and turf.
us all, so let's
Yeah.
stick together, mate.
Yeah.
Get your swerf and turf.
Yeah.
I've not heard that before.
Oh, really? Yeah.
That's hysterical. I love it. I've got to make up a graphic for that. That's funny.
Yeah, they're foul.
$10 swerf and turf Tuesdays.
That's why it breaks my heart so much when you do find sex workers who are, transphobic. Because I'm like, are you not fucking past that? I sort of, when you meet, or not meet, but when you see transphobes online who are, anti-sex work, you go, well, of course, you're fucking idiots. And, that all. But when it's somebody from within our community, it's like...
So this is for a from the Kirby Institute, a study from the Kirby Institute on the Australian Trans and Gender Diverse Sexual Health Survey in 2018, and they found within Australia 20% of trans and gender diverse people in Australia have participated in sex work. So 1 in 5, basically, who have participated in sex work, and the base rate is actually 13% among the general population. So that's actually 54% more likely if you're a transgender diverse person to engage in sex work in Australia. So yeah, I mean, it's very significant. Like 50% is like more likely to engage in sex work as a trans and or gender diverse person.
So this is a tricky one, Sophie, but are you able to answer how all of these pressures and attitudes have shaped your personal experience with your relationship with your body, your gender, and even your sexual identity?
Yeah, so I think I've kind of like gone through like a bit of a process. I think there's like initially when I got into sex work, I found it was like a very positive journey. Like I'm trying to like avoid the use of the cliched word empowering because like, you know, it's kind of like overused in some aspects. But like I think there was like a lot of value to sex work for me because as trans people and like trans feminine people, we're just like we kind of like fall into this bind where we're like not supposed to be sexual because we're like trying to like be respectable citizens. It's kind of like I was just reading this book by Mirelle Miller-Young on like basically black sex workers in the US or sex workers of color in the US pornography, and she talks about this like illicit eroticism where you're like, you know, if you're sexual then you're really like a bad person, but like you're sort of like expected to buy into this like respectability politics as like a marginalized person, as like a person of color, or like as a trans worker, because you're expected to be this like model citizen in some ways. This model citizen and like sex work really doesn't fit that image. So I've kind of like for basically ever since I transition, like not really at all engaged in my sexuality up until that point. I was very, very like gray ace, or like, you know, I felt like in many ways that I was like didn't have a sex life. And I also didn't really have a desire to have a sex life and to have sex. But getting into sex work, I guess, kind of like really helped me discover my sexuality in many ways, like discover what I liked, what I didn't like, and that I did actually also like having sex, which was like something that I wasn't really, because you also don't really know how to relate to your body because there isn't really like a blueprint for it other than like, you know, there is like pornography, but it's not really necessarily a realistic blueprint of how to like relate to your trans body as a trans person. So in many ways at the beginning I thought it was like a very, very like positive journey. I could like really experiment and find ways to like have pleasure with my body, and there's also an aspect of it, like, because when you like sort of open social media or engage in any sort of like media today, is like it's like always like trans people are like a problem, and you're sort of like kind of like it's like you just kind of like inadvertently internalize that like you're just like this sort of like, you know, this like problem, you're so just like this like abomination in a way, you know, like this really bad thing, and that really doesn't make you feel very good about your body and about yourself and your existence. So getting into sex work was kind of like flipped that on its head, because like all of a sudden I would have like all these people that like, you know, find me really attractive for like also problematic reasons, which I will like delve into now. But like it was like at first it was like really positive. I was like, wow, like I'm sexy, I'm hot, like, you know, look at me. And I think we all know that is like a very like that is something that like sex work can do for us. But then obviously like as time went on, I sort of like became like became more used to that sort of dynamic, and I started also seeing some of the problems in that dynamic. And it's like that most clients don't really necessarily like the way they make me feel is not necessarily like as a beautiful woman, but like they just are interested in me being trans, and specifically that means in like, you know, me having a penis. That's literally all they care about, and that's like way less empowering than I originally thought it would be. So I guess I kind of like gone through that sort of like journey, and I think a lot of like finding like a healthy space, or like not healthy, but like finding a good space in sex work for oneself is, I think, also like being able to like do it on your own terms, and I think there's like spaces like that, but it's very hard in full service work to find a space like that. I think there's like more space for it maybe if you're doing like independent like pornography work, where you're just like collabing with people that really respect you, and you can like script and have sex in exactly the way that you find like really like fun and enjoyable and empowering. But obviously when you're working in like a market context where you're trying to make as much money as possible, where you're working with clients, then you have to like compromise, of course.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's been like a really mixed bag, and I have to always remind myself that it's not all. And I think that's like what I mean, I guess like a lot of sex workers and sex work advocacy is about, is like it's not all great and it's not all terrible. It's like really like, it's like there's like different aspects of it that we need to individually examine and highlight some of the problematic aspects that we can improve, while also acknowledging that there's like good parts to it that can really help us.
Yeah, for sure.
So what can clients do to better support trans workers and to make them feel more comfortable when they do see gender diverse workers?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's been like a real, that's like a really, like, that's like, I pull my hair out at this question, because like, I think it's like, sometimes I do really wonder whether there is like there is like a good way of like, or like an ethical way of making this encounter like productive for both sides. It's like, I mean, I guess like what they shouldn't do is like a good place to start, and like they really shouldn't just like obsess about the fact that you're trans. They really shouldn't specifically obsess about your genitalia, because like as like a person who wants to be sexual, like there's like so much more to my sexuality than just like what's in my pants,
Yep.
So like I think as a client you have to like not obsess about the genitalia of the trans person, but also just like not just, I think you have to really ask yourself some questions like around like, why are you seeing me? Like, are you really just seeing me because it's like this like kinky fun thing, like I gotta tick this off the bucket list, like I've never been with a trans worker, and then like, go back to like seeing like, because I this is another issue that I have, like, I get a lot of people for whom it's just like a box ticking exercise. And I was recently speaking to a cis worker, and she was saying, yeah, we get that too. And like, I'm sure you get that too, because people are like, oh, I want to be with a sex worker. I've never been with a sex worker. Mm-hmm. But like, I find it really, really hard to like have, to like break out of that just like box ticking situation. Yeah. And I think it's like, I have an inkling that it's like just more common for us, where they're like, this is this novelty item that I need to try out, and then I can go back to like having regular sex, regular quote unquote, like, which means just like cis, like hetero sex. So I guess like don't also approach it as like this box ticking exercise. It's like really frustrating. I mean, it's like it makes it really hard to build a sustainable, reputable business with regulars. It makes it really hard. It just like incentivizes me to also like not put effort into the session, because, well, you're just like not going to come again. This is just like a drunken like escapade for you. So like, fuck you, like, why am I providing like a good service to you? I want to like, I think it's nice to have like reliable regulars that you can have, like, that you can, together like explore, or like explore their sex, or like help them work through like sexual issues or whatever, like something like of a more like something that you can build on and work on. So, but like, if it's there's just like too much box ticking, I think, and it's like really frustrating. It's really, really frustrating. So I guess like the best clients I've had were the ones that like booked me because they're like having anal sex. They don't care that they don't care that I'm trans. They don't even care about my genitalia. They just like want to get laid, and they thought I was hot, and they're all like, oh, like you know, they just wanted to have anal sex, and it's like really hard to find like cis workers who have anal sex, so it's like I have a better rate for anal sex, but like, you know, obviously, even though the market economics behind that are also problematic, it's for me like a really like nice space to be with, like just like to be with like a client who like doesn't actually care whether I'm trans or not. He just like he just wants to get laid. He thought my pictures were like pretty, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I think there's it's rare, you know. I can tell immediately when someone books me because they're like obsessed about me being trans, and unfortunately it's like, you know, 95% of all bookings or 98% of all bookings.
Yeah. That's got to be a really yuck feeling.
It's irritating, yeah. Sometimes you get the fuckboys, and you know they just wanna have sex, and they just wanna have a good time, and they don't really care. And I think that's great. You know, I think that's way better. You know, and they're like, don't just exclusively see trans workers, because you get these hobbyists, and like all they do is they just see trans workers. They know all the trans workers in Australia because there's not that many, and they just go from trans worker to trans worker, and they're just like obsessed with the fact that we're trans. And it's like, honestly, it's like it's just like it's profoundly alienating. Like it's not. I'm like so much more than that, you know.
Yeah, I mean it's absolutely fine to have your preferences, of course, but putting someone in that box. Ugh.
Yeah, and you see that there's a lot of similarities with, like, you know, you get clients who just see like Asian workers or who just see black workers, and I think there's like an element of like fetishization. It's different if you like see all sorts of different types of sex workers. As opposed to if you only see this one particular type of sex worker, then I feel like you're really just like, I'm not saying the person, but if you just see Asian sex workers or if you just see black sex workers, it's like you have like a thing that you're like obsessed about, and I think you really need to like interrogate that, because like, you know, that's not really what, to me, intimacy is about. That's not really what sex is about. It really shouldn't be about, you know, this one thing that is like identity based. You should be able to have pleasure with anyone who's attractive to you. Yes. But like that attraction you have to interrogate, and if it feeds into and is like tied into these like, you know, structures of power and like these ideas of racism and like transphobia, then you're just like in a way perpetuating that violence.
Well said. So another tricky one, I think, but what can peers do? So I guess cisgendered, basically, peers do to better support trans workers.
So I think that there's a lot that peers can do, and I like just really can not emphasize enough how important it is that peers do this. But like I've had peers hook me up with doubles, which is great because I get always paid way above my rate, because like cis rates are not always but often way higher or like consistently higher than trans rates. If like a cis peer who is like in the same like has like similar branding and I has a similar following than I, they just like they charge more than me. And I just can't charge that much. So like hooking me up with doubles is like amazing. I love it. And then also asking for collabs. I had like cis workers like asking me to do like OnlyFans collabs, which is great because again, like you have like larger client bases. You have like a bigger pool of potential clients and a bigger demographic that you cater to, because unfortunately there's just like a whole bunch of like there's a whole bunch of men who just like would never give money to or see trans workers. So like my like reach like in terms of marketing is like limited compared to that of a cis worker. Like I can't get the same follower numbers than like a cis worker on Twitter. If you look at the top porn stars, you compare like the most famous 5 cis porn stars, they have way more than the most famous 5 trans porn stars in terms of followers. So just doing collabs, offering doubles with them, or talking about doubles, or suggesting doubles to your client. Like sometimes a lot of guys are like curious, but they'll be like, you know, they won't do it until like they're regular like cis worker suggests it to them. And then those are like in terms of work, but like in terms of advocacy, of course, you can also do so much more. Like whenever you see like some toxic Twitter thread where there's like some conversation about, like being face in or face out. It's like, yeah, well, think about the trans workers, and this also applies to other marginalized workers, queer workers, workers of color, who just like can't afford to like be face in, who can't afford to not have anal sex. Just like think of like who can't afford to just charge more, like that kind of stuff. Like think about us, think about marginalized workers when these conversations are happening.
It's been really great for me to hear. I've heard some similar sentiments shared recently. When I first entered the industry, because I get a lot of clients who say, I'd really love to have a booking with a trans worker, but I'm a bit unsure. Like, would you do it with me? Exactly kind of what you said.
Yeah.
And early on, I contacted a bunch of trans workers, and I was less connected to the industry at this point, right? And asked about that, and a couple said no, but most of them just didn't get back to me. And I took that as being like, oh, okay, maybe that's not, maybe that's not the done thing and whatever. And incorrectly, I took it that way and then didn't try again for years. And now I'm like, no, that's not the case. I was probably going about it the wrong way or blah, or whatever. Yeah. And now I'm much more connected and I know a bunch of trans workers. I'm not just contacting them out of the blue. But yeah, I had this impression that wasn't wanted. And now I'm glad. I'm sure it isn't wanted from some people, sure. But now I'm glad that I know that it's something that I that you can do. Should do to the people. Yeah.
I guess like speaking to that, I think you have to bear in mind that it's like a complex situation because you do have a lot of trans women and trans femme work, more like, trans women specifically who like insist on just like having straight sex with men. So there'll be like strict bottoms and they don't like working with other women. That's not, they don't like working with other trans women and they don't like working with other cis women. And that comes like, they're just like really, really straight. And like, it's like a complex space because, there's like, you're not like necessarily like also, when you had to fight so hard for like your gender, you're like sometimes like, also, you're sometimes also like not necessarily willing to like, be particularly queer about your sexuality. I mean, some might also, some like trans women are also just like really, really straight, and there's like nothing that they can do about it. But sure. Like, just like cis women. But I think there's like an added layer of like, I guess like, I don't know how to call it, but like I guess like an added layer of like it's like a potentially triggering territory where like you don't want to be that person who is just like, oh, now I have to like top cis women as well. Yeah. Like this is like what I was expected to do all my life before I transitioned. Like, I just like identify my gender because like one also informs the other. So like my gender is like so like firmly like set on womanhood that like I want to just have this very, very like cis, like heteronormative type of sex.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was what I thought might have been the issue. But now I know that certainly can be an issue for some people, but it's not going to stop me from, reaching out and making the suggestion and putting it out there.
Yeah, you just have to definitely keep trying. Yeah, and I think you'll see that. I mean, you see that also when you look at ads. I think like a lot of workers will be like, I work with women or I work with people of all genders and like body types. So I guess probably also maybe bear that in mind when you're like reaching out. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Just personal help for Jenna there.
Do you have any special or affirming stories from your time within the industry to share with us? Give us some positivity after all of this heaviness.
I mean, I guess the best part, I don't know what, I like managed to buy like a plot of land. So, it's really like for me was like, and for like, I think like, again, like, I think like a lot of clients have like this really hard time realizing that it is like about the money for a lot of us. And
it's a job.
And
it's
like,
a job. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like that's really honestly been the best part for me, like not being poor anymore, being able to like actually like buy like a place where I don't have to be like, soon I won't have to be like a rental serf. So it's like, yeah, that's been like honestly the best part. But like in terms of like the sex, I mean, I guess like I've had like some really like fun sessions, of course, and it's like nice when they happen. So like, I mean, I have this one client, for example, and like his thing is like, so he books trans women to gangbang cis workers. So it's like, because he doesn't want to like book. And again, this is like, again, another example of like trans women have to like be the stand-in for what actually the type of sexual labor that like actually like a male sex worker should be doing. So like I have this client, and there's a lot of trans workers who just like outright refuse to do it. But like I'm also really, really gay. So like I also do like having sex with women, with cis women or women more generally. So like I have this client and his whole thing is like, oh, like I want to like gangbang like a cis worker, like, and he like books 3 trans women and himself and then a cis worker, and like, and then like we like do a gangbang.
That sounds fucking
and it's
fun.
like,
oh my god.
yeah, it's like, I mean, it's.
I'm wondering where my invite was, but it must have got lost in the mail. or
Yeah, I
something.
mean, the sessions are always like really fun, and they're like, he's not a demanding client at all. Most of the time he likes watching, actually, so he just like sits there and watches and just joins in at the end. But one of the most rewarding parts has been for me to like, I've been like to him, you know what, like I want to like switch it up sometime. I want to be the one who gets gangbanged.
Yes.
Because like I was like, you know, I'm way more of like a bottom in my private life. And I was like, yeah, I want to be in that position. I want to switch it up. So I like just basically convinced him into like giving me like my like dream session where like I just like get porn star style gangbanged by like, you know, a bunch of dicks. And like that I'm like really excited about. It's like actually it's like happening. It's like hasn't happened yet. But like we're like sort of like locked it in, and
Jenna
like,
and I
and
are
then
both so
and then
jealous.
I'm gonna get dominated by like a bunch of trans women, and there's also a cis worker there who's gonna dominate me too. So I get to finally like switch the roles. But it's like really so like fun when you're not this like doing this like stand-in for like male sex worker, you know, when you get to like have like, you know, you get to like just have sex that you really enjoy you're having yourself in your private life. Like, yeah, I mean, it's not like I have gangbangs all the time in my private life. I mean, it's like really hard to organize like a responsible, safe like gangbang. But it's like a really cool bucket list item to like tick off the list.
Yeah,
I love that.
Cool.
Financial freedom and gangbangs. Good answer. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for
I love
summarizing it.
this. The term, the stand-in for a male sex worker is something I have never thought about.
Yeah.
You've really blown my mind with that. And I think that's huge.
Yeah.
That really needs unpacking. So, yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's just a lot of clients also, it's just like internalized homophobia. Like a lot of clients, so like one of the most common types of bookings that I get, especially like branding myself as like more of like a mistress kind of thing, or originally I've sort of like toned that down a lot. But one of the most common types of bookings that I would get is like sissy bookings. It's like where men want to dress up in lingerie and have their makeup put on, and then they just want to get railed senseless. And like I get that feeling, but like it's like so problematic asking a trans woman to do this for you. And
that's like the worst possible person to ask to do that.
yeah, it's like, I mean, like in a way it's like I understand where you're like coming from, because there's like a lot of suppressed like sexuality in that sort of like fantasy. There's a lot of like queerness that you're not engaging with, and that you're engaging with in a, you know, reductive and like fetishizing and like problematic way. But like, because like, you know, womanhood is like not necessarily humiliating, but like a lot of these is just straight up not humiliating. Sorry, like putting academic talk on where I put it qualifiers on everything.
Yes.
But like they sort of like want to explore like that subspace, that like space of being humiliated, that space of just being like a pillow princess, and you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but like, you know, the way you're doing it is like in this like really like annoying way for trans workers. You know, there's a lot of trans workers who are like, I don't do sissy bookings, you know, it's like unethical. I don't like doing them. Like I do them because I kind of see there's like a sort of like queer aspect to it. I try and like make them think more about their queerness and their queer sexuality, and like have them embrace their like, you know, sub side or feminine side or however you want to call it. So it's like, yeah, it's like it's problematic. Yeah, it's like it's a complex field of desire that you're trying to navigate.
Yeah, wow.
Just so much for demand for that as well, isn't there? Like I've never advertised anything like that. I've never marketed as anything but like boring vanilla cis girl. And I get so much sissying requests, and it comes up so often. Like it's a huge thing. So I mean, I can only imagine. It's. I'm just thinking about how much I get it.
Yeah.
And I'm not like, it obviously is massive.
I get it all the time. Yeah.
So
Honestly,
much
and I really support cis workers branding themselves in a way that they're offering like strap-on sissification services, because please take that kind of label off me. Like I don't want to fucking do it. I'm so over it. It's like literally all I fucking get all the time.
Yeah. Well, we sort of tried to end it on a positive, and we didn't succeed, but that's okay.
That's what it was
Life
about
is not
today.
always a happy ending.
We needed to know more about the things that the challenges, and that means not every episode is going to be all, you know, sunshine. In fact, I'd say more of our episodes have challenging aspects, but that's what it's about. We're here to say that the job is a job, and that that there are so many people that face a lot of challenges within it, and learn and educate. That's what it's all about.
So thank you so much for helping us to do that, or just doing it for us today. I mean, we didn't do anything. So thank you, Sophie, for educating.
Thank you so much for facilitating and letting me just go on like long rants as well.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
I loved it.
I don't think there's a sentence that you said that was not informative and valuable and relevant. And like you're a wonderful speaker. And obviously, you've got a fair bit of experience. You're obviously very knowledgeable in all of this, and not just through lived experience, but through a lot of research. And so it's just been such a pleasure to have you. We're incredibly grateful for you taking the time and doing the emotional labour as well.
Yes.
Absolute pleasure. What you're doing is great.
Yay.
Awesome.
Thank you, Sophie. It's been great to have you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
See ya. Thanks for having me.
Thank you to the world's sexiest patrons, our new giving somebody Russell, our new generous somebody Jimmy, our new very generous somebody B.
Our even more generous somebodies are Hello, it's me, Alex, Dave, the Ashley Stafford, the Rhiannon Rhodes, Nomad, Adele, Afraz, Andrew, Biggie, our secret admirer, our footstool, Greenie, Lachlan,
Leslie, Sub London, Miss Billy, Mr. E, NK, the Ophelia Parker, Scott C, Simon, Steve, Timmy, Wheezy, Luke, and Ellen.
And our extremely generous somebodies are Crochet Cat, Aaron, Adam Smith, Skippy, B&J, Andrew, Pete, the Sienna Saint, and Adam Moore. Thank you so much for your support, our lovely patrons, and thank you, whoever is still listening at this point of the episode, you completionist, you.
Yeah, we love you. We know you're out there because you let us know when you find these little... Oh, that's a cat vomiting. Should we leave that in?
Oh, my God. Yeah, do it.
Yeah,
that's a great Easter egg.
Yeah,
I hope he's vomiting Easter eggs.
Enjoy that one. And we will...
You just can't handle having a few seconds left on the thing, can you?
No, you can't handle
it
the whole way through.
Oh, you just got to keep going. We're just going to...
Corbin's dropping fur balls everywhere. It's really nice.
Jeez.
Yeah, well, he's got a lot of fur.
Lovely.
He's got a lot of fur. All right.
He does.
Love you guys.
You better go deal with that. Bye. That was great. one of our best. Please look out for us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon. Our name everywhere is Somebody You Pod, as in podcast. Our Patreon starts at just $3 a month, and you can get all of our episodes ad-free and a day early, plus bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes action, bloopers, and more. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the voices of sex workers. And remember, somebody you love might just be a sex worker.